Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go straight to the program of the event. Now we start by introducing the distinguished guests here. We are going to start by introducing the chairman of this great occasion, the Kingsley Moghalu Youth Initiative Summit, the public lecture. It is to be chaired by our able professor, the former chairman of the Nigerian Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Atairu Jega. You're most welcome, sir. Please come
Great Nigerian student!
Great!
Great Nigerian student!
Great!
Great Nigerian student!
Great!
Great youth!
Great!
Great Nigerian youth!
Great!
Give 3 bossa for wonderful professor!
Bossa! 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 Ladies and gentlemen, today's occasion is going to be a public lecture, a panel discussion and all that, and it is going to feature a distinguished professor of practice from the prestigious Tufts University, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Distinguished Professor Kingsley.
Great Nigerian youth! Great Nigerian youth! Great Nigerian student! Give our wonderful professor 3 bossa for him.
Bossa, bossa, bossa. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Moghalu's lecture would be discussed later by a discussant, a distinguished member of the academia, in an intellectual of the highest level, Malam Kabir Sufi Said, my teacher, a father and mentor. You're welcome to the table, please, sir. 3 bossa to Malam Kabir Sufi Said. Bossa, bossa, bossa. Ladies and gentlemen, our occasion is honored by Malam Dasuki Galadenchi, a very distinguished member of the Kano business environment. Please, you're welcome, sir. We are also graced by Malam Farooq Shehu, who was the special assistant to Professor Moghalu when he was the Deputy Governor of Central Bank, and he retired from the CBN as a director. Today's occasion is also greatly honored by him. You're most welcome, sir, and please to the high table. Other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, you are most welcome to this event, and this brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is a welcome address by the President of Towards an Intellectual Tomorrow Initiative, Madam Aladdin Bashir Bugaji, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to issue a particularly warm welcome to all of you, especially to our esteemed guests who have tightened their schedules to come in and share in their wealth of experience and knowledge, to the students from all around the vicinity, here and abroad, the great people of Kano, my beloved people of Nigeria. I greet you with the highest honor and dignity a human deserves. I want to welcome you all to the Kingsley Moghalu Youth Initiative Summit, organized by Towards an Intellectual Tomorrow Initiative and sponsored by the Isaac Moghalu Foundation. The themes of the discussion today will revolve centrally around the youth, within an axis or lens, if you wish, of participation, good governance, transformation in social, political, and economic perspectives. There seems, from all angles, an unspoken consensus of a more increased youth participation in the issues of governance. Now, part of the main concern, which we hope this summit will address, is how the participation would look like, or to rephrase, in what way would the youth contribute? Do we need a total overhaul of the system? Or do we need a gradual plan of integration? And if so, what form is that going to take? Now, the principle of democracy, the foundational principle, is built of an effective democracy, is built on a well-informed electorate. Now, if that is in jeopardy, then the structure collapses and all the institutions in it fall apart. And you're very familiar with the resultant output. Now, how does TIT initiative come into perspective? Now, TIT is a platform that grew in response to developing the right mind frame to think about these issues in a systemic way and engage with them in a critical thinking framework. And on those principles, it looks through the society and brings forth discussions and arguments to help guide the endeavor. We're gathered here in the spirit of critical thinking, in that spirit of TIT, to introduce our discussion format, draw from an immense pool of experience and knowledge, and engage with some of the most critical issues of our society. The role of youth and what the future holds for them. But why do we stress about critical thinking? The dangers of uncritical thinking, I would give a classical scenario. In the 2015 general elections, we found a philosophy of APC-SAC. Now, the APC-SAC is a clear example in living memory of how, on critically examining our thought patterns, the pathway it leads. And another rhetoric that seems to be gaining weight is, in the near future, whoever is going to come out must be a youth. Now, what does that mean? It's very worrisome, and with all generalizations, which are false, because in the process we may alienate competent hands and usher forward hoodlums in the spirit of youth. Of course we need youth, but in what way? I hope also through discussions we'll be able to find out who the youth is. Looking at the Nigerian political, economic, and social framework, another sad reality is the criteria we use to elect our leaders and the criteria we use to judge them, to evaluate them. That all boils down to our critical thinking, our mind frame in which we think about these issues, which we hope to engage. In conclusion, I hope that what we learned today, the discussions we'll have today, will apply that critical thinking, that spirit, to examine ourselves, to examine issues of our society, nay, examine even what the discussants are going to present to you forward. Don't take everything at face value, engage with that, and hopefully through that process, we would create a new Nigeria that the youth can actually participate, a new Nigeria that we will all be proud of, a new Nigeria that would hopefully be among the world leaders. Thank you very much.
Let me start by calling him, the chairman of the occasion, to come and give his opening remark, please. Mr. Chairman, sir, you're welcome.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. I'm very pleased to be invited to be the chairman of today's occasion. And I would like to express my thanks and appreciation to the organizers of this very important event, which focuses on the role of the youth in the transformation of Nigeria, politically or economically. No doubt it's a well-chosen topic. It's quite apt under the circumstances when Nigeria is contemplating how to move forward and how to get the right kind of quality materials that can help put this nation on the right track as we seek for fundamental changes to our politics and to our economy. I'm also very, very proud to be associated with the guest lecturer today, Professor Kingsley Moghalu. He has been introduced as a former governor, deputy governor of the Central Bank, and I think it is very, very important to also state that Kingsley Moghalu was one of the stalwarts, one of the key assistants to the area of Kano in the transformation of the central bank and the economy of Nigeria. He is an astute intellectual, a very, very competent and robust economist, and obviously somebody who has not only contributed to the shaping of the Nigerian economy in his role as the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, but who has a great future in terms of helping reposition this country and also building this country to be the icon in Africa that it ought to be. Obviously, his commendable initiative through the Kingsley Moghalu Foundation and his support for this youth summit is one of the clear impressions of his passion about Nigeria, of his commitment and dedication to the progress and development of our country, and in particular to his desire to contribute in whatever way possible in order to have the right kind of engagement of our youth in our politics and in our political economy. Professor Kingsley Moghalu is also a professor at Tufts University, and he's at the cutting edge of his specialization, making tremendous contributions and public engagements and writing books and articles, which are very, very important, not just for transformation in Nigeria, but for transformation indeed in the whole continent of Africa. So it's a great opportunity that we have here today to be able to listen to Professor Kingsley Moghalu speak on the role of the Nigerian youth in the quest for political and economic transformation. Very, very important. In my younger days as a university student, now I am very old, at least my gray hair will tell you how old I am. We feel very unhappy and dissatisfied. When we are growing up in this university as students, there were a lot of what I call bridges across the Niger. We didn't know anything but Nigeria, and we all worked for Nigeria. And we had friends from all over this country. Tribe and religion and ethnicity were no barriers. Unfortunately, when we reflect over the state of our country today, it pains us that those bridges had been systematically removed and eroded. And I must mention that when we talk about the role of youth in our country, one of the most important preconditions is finding ways and the means of also rebuilding those bridges. It is not youth working in enclaves of religion or ethnicity, but it is youth working together, joining hands across the bridges in this country, across the Niger, and working in order to ensure that Nigeria progresses. Professor Kingsley Moghalu is also one of those that are passionate about rebuilding these bridges across religion, across ethnicity, and across all other divides that tend to divide us and separate us in this country. So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to this important occasion, and I invite you to sit and to listen very, very carefully to the contributions of our guest speaker today. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, while the chairman was delivering his opening remark, we duly thank him for this occasion is graced by the representative by the Emir of Kano himself, ably represented by Dr. Kano Hakimangarku. You are most welcome, sir. Now, I would like to, with the permission of the chairman, invite our guest lecturer, the lead lecture, to be given by Professor Kingsley Moghalu, OON, former Deputy Governor of Nigeria Central Bank, as a professor of practice from the Tufts University in the United States. You are most welcome, sir.
morning, Kano. Good morning, fellow Nigerians. Mr. Chairman, Professor Atahiru Jega, he is a wonderful man and a very dear brother and friend, former chairman of INEC, and we know that he was the first, perhaps probably the first INEC chairman in recent memory that was universally acclaimed to have done a fair there was no uru. I don't want to say uru, but Mr. Chairman, Professor Jega, the representative of the Emir of Kano, my dear brother, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, now Muhammadu Sanusi II, represented here by the Dokajin Khan, our Haji Muhammad Aliyu. Welcome. The director of the firehouse, Dr. Kabir Yusuf, several distinguished ladies and gentlemen here. It's really a great pleasure and a great honor to be back in Kano. I always feel whenever I come to Kano that it's like a visit home. And Kano is a great city of international repute. And it's a place I have had a very close association with through my relationship, primarily through my relationship with the MM. When we were at the Central Bank, we came here several times. And so I got very used to visiting the city. And then, of course, through my friendship also with Professor Atahiru Jega as well. So I just feel as if I am really at home. And the youth of Kano, where they go, the nation goes. That's the truth. And so we decided, and let me also recognize the fine young man, Isaac Moghalu, who, as we all know, was the best graduating student at Bayero University this last year. I also forgot to mention Ahmad Bello University. Yeah, all these rivalries, you know. It's good. It's good. It's good. Yeah. And of course, I can't forget to mention Farouk Sheikh, who was my special assistant at the Central Bank. He's a native of Kano, and through his excellent performance, and with my support, I should say, was able to be promoted to the rank of director in the Central Bank, which is the highest career position you can get to in the bank, a departmental director. The deputy governors and the governor, of course, we know, are political appointees of the president. So Farouk, I'm happy to be here with you. I've never met anybody from Kano who wasn't really a great fellow, quite frankly. I'm looking for the exceptions to the rule. So I want to talk about the title of what I want to say is 60 million youth. What next? Or you could say 60 million youth, and so what? Let's really talk about that. And I think Al-Amin, set the tone when he talked about critical thinking and why it is important
that we think critically. There are two, but before I go into that, I want to pay special tribute to the Emir of Kano, Muhammadu Sanusi II. In life, in our lives, I think the ethos is that we should work hard. We should all work very hard at whatever we do so that we can be successful and leave a good legacy and all that. But most of us here also believe in God and believe that God intervenes in our lives one way or the other. Usually he doesn't come down and do it. Normally he will use circumstances and human beings like you and I. And so after 17 years in the United Nations, where I had most of my career, and I left after becoming a director in the UN, which was the highest career rank in the United Nations, I resigned. I was too young to retire. I wanted to do an early retirement, but I was 45, and I was told that early retirement can only be at 55. So you're 10 years away from the qualification for early retirement. So I said, well, okay, then I'll resign. And so I resigned. My permanent appointment, I had a permanent appointment, but I resigned because I wanted to move on to other things. And I resigned and set up a consultancy firm in Geneva, Switzerland, which was my last posting while in the UN. It was called Sogato Strategies. And I was consulting on risk management for various companies that were interested in investing in African countries. And I was enjoying myself and having a very good time. Happy to be a free man, not in the bureaucracy, my own boss. When God sent somebody to change this trajectory. And that was Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, as he then was. He said to me, listen, Kingsley, I've just been appointed Deputy Governor of the Central Bank. I want to do some very great reforms. But I am looking for the right type of person to lead and anchor this reform. You've had an international career, you have a good international profile and a good professional profile. I would like you to come home to do this job. If you agree, I will recommend you to President Umaru Yar'Adua. I don't appoint deputy governors. The president appoints the governor and the deputies. But President Yar'Adua has assured me that whoever I recommend to him is the person that he will appoint to this vacancy. I want to confess to you, the central bank was the last thing on my mind at this time. I was focusing on other things. So at first he said, and I said, no. I've set up a business and I want to grow this business and I am happy doing it. He said, don't be too quick to say no. Sleep over it. Tomorrow, let us have lunch. This was happening in Cape Town in South Africa at the World Economic Forum. The next day we had lunch. He arrived before me. I just came in. I said, oh, Lamido, how is Nigeria? He said, Kingsley, don't ask me how Nigeria is. If you want to take the offer we're making, you come home, let us fix the place. I'm not here to do analysis or to write long stories. So I will not tell you how Nigeria is. I want you to tell me whether you're coming home or not. I said, this, my friend, is something else. So we had lunch and we talked. And he, made a case. And I said, I will come home because of you. Let me be very clear. I'm coming because of you. I'm coming on your own personal recognizance. Because many of us in the diaspora have come home supposedly to come and help our country and have had horror stories to tell. So I said, it's you that I'm holding on. If anything goes wrong, it's you. So I said, first of all, I asked him, I'm supposed to be your deputy governor. Will I really be your deputy? Or is there some special assistant or some uncle that I have to go through to be your deputy? Because I hear these types of stories. He laughed. He said, no, it doesn't work like that. You'll be the real deputy. There's 4 deputy governors and the governor, and we all work as a team. So, and it turned out to be so. So I'm just trying to say that Kano has a special place in my heart and in my life, because coming home to serve our country because of that invitation changed my life. I could have been a distinguished diplomat, former diplomat in the UN, doing many things, so comfortable, you know, and so on. But national service, the opportunity to make a contribution to the progress of your country is a special honor. And because God used our brother, the Emir, to make that possible for him, for me in my life, it's a very special thing for me. And therefore, he's a man that I love very much and that I respect very much. As I said to him when I visited here I think in November, I said, well, you know, Serik, you know, even in a marriage, husband and wife occasionally will disagree. So if I ever disagreed with you, let it be. Don't take it to heart. And he said, no, of course he doesn't. So I'm just trying to say that this really is a hometown for me in a way. We all are aware of what's going on in Nigeria today. In fact, the question now is, when you open the newspaper every morning, what's the next bombshell that is dropping? Is it from OBJ? Is it from IBB? Is it from is it from Jagar? Is it from you know? So, but interesting things are happening. But the youth have a pivotal role in the future of Nigeria. I, as a citizen, am sick and tired of what has been going on in this country. I'm fed up, and that's why I gave up my professorship at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University in Massachusetts to come home and set up the Institute for Governance and Economic Transformation and make my direct contribution, removed from the structural encumbrances of any organization. If I was in the central bank, if I want to speak, I'll have to think first about what the governor will think about what I'm going to say. But now I'm a free man. So I decided to come home and contribute. And what we're now doing this morning is part of that contribution, engaging with our young people so that we can fashion a way forward for this country. And as Professor Jaga said, our young people all over the country, not just the young people in the Nnewi or the young people in the southeast and all that. I'll speak a little bit more about what's killing this country, which is the absence of a worldview. And because of the absence of a worldview, narrow views reign. And that is why we are poor. There's no other reason this country is poor other than that narrow worldviews are in control. When you have a real worldview of transformation, you recognize that you should create as a leader a rising tide that lifts all boats, from Kano to Lokoja, to Ekotebene, to Nnewi, to Abeokuta, wherever. So long as it is Nigeria we're talking about, we must think more broadly and more in a larger way. Who are we in the world? We are all God's children, and we're entitled to a place under the sun. All of us. You in Kano, me in Nnewi, the guy in Onitsha, the guy in Abeokuta, everyone. The minute we begin to make it a zero-sum game, winner take all. I, from Nnewi, I must come to power. Once I come to power, it is only about Nnewi people are now in power, and everybody else is an outsider. That is the foundation for poverty. And you shouldn't wonder why nearly 100 million people in this country live on less than $1 a day. Don't wonder about it. We'll come to that. Now, 60 million people, 60 million youth, what next? There are two visions of youth. The first I will put before you is the one put forward by Benjamin Disraeli, a former Prime Minister of Great Britain. And he said, the youth of a nation are the trustees of prosperity. And then there's another vision of youth, that is represented in a famous quip by the founding director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, Edgar Hoover. He was FBI director for almost 50 years. And he said, blessed are the youth, for they shall inherit the national debt. Blessed are the youth, for they shall inherit the national debt. A very sarcastic statement, but perhaps he had Nigeria in mind. Today, we have, today in Nigeria, a national debt profile that is over 20 trillion naira. Now who go pay? The ratio of debt to gross domestic product, GDP, stood at 24% as of January this year. But that's not what is important. What is important is that 66% of our national revenues are now spent servicing the national debt. If you're spending 66% of what you're earning servicing debt, what is left for development? Not much. And we know in the history of Nigeria, regardless of whatever is said, that foreign borrowing has never helped Nigeria. It hasn't. And so I have been recommending that instead of borrowing, that we establish a proper social contract between the state and the citizen, so that the citizens will feel and comply with their duty to pay tax. They can pay tax without being afraid that the money will be stolen. And with the revenues of taxation, development and development projects can take place. That is what happens in every developing country of the world or developed country. Our tax ratio, tax to GDP ratio is 6%, the lowest perhaps in Africa, and certainly lower than other countries of the world. In most advanced countries, it is at least 40% of GDP. So, that is the first thing. So when you're told that blessed are the youth, for you will inherit the national debt, it's a very serious statement, and it applies here. And so, if you're not going to inherit a crushing debt burden tomorrow, then you must do something today. Now, but our youth appear to be blissfully unaware that their future may have been mortgaged. Today, we live in a season of discontent. Poverty rates are as high as 60%. More than 30 million Nigerians, mostly young people like you, have no jobs. In the meantime, our population is growing in leaps and bounds. We have a population growth rate of almost 3%, which is growing faster than our GDP growth rate. And the United Nations projects that by 2050, we may have as many as 400 million Nigerians. 400 million Nigerians. Just think about it. If we get to that ratio on the present trend of governance, think about 400 million people, your cousins, my cousins, our children, ourselves, for those of us who are still alive, but for very young people, certainly you'll be. Think about it. Are people going to start eating each other? Is there going to be social conflict? That is the youth bulge. It is inevitable that there will be a massive implosion if nothing is done today. Therefore, we must fix the problems of tomorrow, today. That's what leadership is about. But someone defined politics as providing the answers to yesterday's problems today. That's what politics is. Leadership, in my own view, is about providing the answers to tomorrow's questions today. Let's get it straight. The difference between leadership and politics. In this country, we're all politics, but no leadership. And that is why we're poor. That is why we have not been able to achieve transformation. So, the power belongs to you. Although you may not know it, the future is in your hands. Only you, the youth of Nigeria, can change the trajectory of Nigeria. You have the numbers, but can you rise to the challenge? The nation waits in bated breath. And so, the question is, are you registered to vote in 2019? We're here to talk about youth participation in politics, in governance, in democracy. So we must start with the fundamental question. Are you registered to vote? Do you have a PVC? Or have you given up? Oh, those politicians. Why waste my time? Let me face my Gary. But when you are apathetic, or maybe you're, like many young people, very active on the social media, and so you sit on your behind, venting and abusing everybody on Facebook. And maybe if you're the more, optimistic type, you take pictures of your beautiful self and put on Twitter, on Instagram. Or you're blasting away on Twitter, but you don't have your voter's card. How are you going to change anything? How are you going to change anything? You can rant all you like on Facebook. If you don't go and vote, you are a non-entity. Because that's your civic right. That's your democratic right. You are abusing your own fundamental rights. You, not Buhari. Don't call Buhari. It's you that is abusing your own rights. You're failing to make use of it. So, we shouldn't be sitting around. We shouldn't be like those in America. They say, to use an expression, that they are all throat and no voice. All throat and no voice. We don't want to be like that. You may be on the queue of unemployment. You graduated from a university or a polytechnic, but you have no job and no hope of one. How can you change your destiny? Here's what you need to know. Only your vote can bring about a competent government that can wage a decisive war against poverty and unemployment. We need a government, in my view, that is competent enough to create an economic environment that creates jobs. The government does not create jobs. The government creates an environment that creates jobs. And that environment is one in which entrepreneurship reigns. People can set up small businesses, and those small businesses create new jobs. In most studies, they show that it's SMEs that creates the most jobs in most countries of the world. So therefore, I think that we need a government, in my own view, that can really reposition this country for small businesses, for entrepreneurship. And that is why I have said, and that is my opinion, and as a Nigerian citizen I'm entitled to it, that the 500 billion naira the federal government is budgeting every year and paying to people who are unemployed 5,000 naira a month is a waste of public funds. First of all, there's not much 5,000 naira can do for you. Here's a better way to use the 500 billion. Create a venture capital fund. Do it in partnership with the private sector. And like I say, the government will be an investor, but the private sector partners will run the fund. If the government runs the fund, federal character, politics will come in. And what will get you support from the fund will not be your business plan. And when that is the case, most of the businesses that will be funded by the venture capital fund will fail. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something very strategic. So you do it, the venture capital fund will now invest in new businesses. And those new businesses, if they are done on a proper business plan, most of them will thrive and prosper. In America and many countries of the world, a lot of companies that started as venture capital funded businesses become behemoths. Where did Bill Gates start? In his garage. Where did the Facebook young man start? In his garage. But today, huge, employing thousands of people. This is how wealth is created in any capitalist society. And we need a government that understands this. So I am calling for a 500 billion venture capital fund to be managed, established with a private sector partner. So stop putting that money in the budget and saying you're handing it out to people that we are looking for, but I haven't seen them. And put it in a venture capital fund that everybody can see, and let's see what will happen. This is how to create jobs. So let's talk about the youth bulge, making the most of it. I think there are several paths to youth participation in politics. On one hand, I think we have a choice between voting participation, and that's a heightened exercise of your civic duty and responsibility. And so you can also shape outcomes. So you have a choice between that and youth running for elections, which is a desire to exercise responsibility through service. We know about the Not Too Young to Run bill, and we'll discuss that. On the other hand, there is an option that the youth have to participate in politics and leadership selection, but they're not mutually exclusive, I must say. And then, on the other hand, there's the option of participating in politics and leadership selection through informal civil society processes, such as the movement that gave rise to the Arab Spring in the Maghreb, or what we call structural participation in politics through formal structures of political parties. Again, this is another set of options. Now, in the context of Nigeria, as between the first set of options, that is exercising civic responsibility by voting actively in elections and running for office, which really what they want to be young to run. Hello? Okay, good, yeah. Which is what the Not Too Young to Run bill is about. Like I said, they're not mutually exclusive, but I think it is more important for our youth to participate by voting actively in elections at this stage, because the youth are not participating at all. So where do you begin your participation? Is it to gratify your ego by saying, I'm 25 years, I'm running for president? I think Alamin, again, talked about that. Are you qualified to be president? Or are you simply qualified to be president because I'm a youth? That is not, it doesn't make sense. There are countries that are producing very young leaders. We have Macron, Emmanuel Macron in France today, 39, 40. But check his CV. He's been at it for some time and was a minister of the economy and so on and so on. You know. So you can start young to build your experience that makes you qualified for high office. If you want to run for local government chairman or for some other posts that are lower down in the political order, you can do that. You may not need as much experience as you need to be president. Maybe after having been local government chairman and various other things, you can then aspire to be president. So the point I'm trying to make is that let our youth not be led astray and keep their eye on the ball. What do we want? A better society. What do we want? A better Nigeria. But don't let your ego make you go about this in the wrong way. The most important thing for now, certainly for 2019, is that all the youth of Nigeria vote. And when you vote correctly. you vote with the right questions and the right answers in mind. What do you have to look for when you're voting for someone? President, senator, whatever, governor? 4 things. Character, competence, capacity, and track record. 4 things. If you do not subject anybody who is seeking public office through this lens, you're doing yourself and this nation a disservice. Let us forever perish this thought of, now my brother, it's from my region, it's from my religion, so I'll vote for him or her, without asking these questions. Now, it is possible that the person who you may answer yes on these 4 questions may come from your part of the country. It is very possible, but not necessarily so. So don't ignore people who may come from other places or people who may have other religions, because our failed politicians and our failed political class who have brought us to where we are telling you that that is what matters. You should have what? Critical thinking. Don't fall for it anymore. We want a different Nigeria. Don't vote on the basis of tribe and tongue. For national office, if you're voting for a local government chairman, even then, the person running for local government may be from another part of the country, but he has lived there forever. So, I mean, look, I come from the East. Umaru Altine was mayor of Enugu for 2 terms in the 50s. Was it not Igbos voting for him? Igbos were running against him and losing. And the Igbos, they were voting for Umaru Altine to be their mayor. It's in this same Nigeria that it happened. It is in this same Nigeria that Azikiwe won to be premier of the Western region. He was campaigning in Yoruba. He will come to Hausa, he campaigned in Hausa. He was born in Zungeru. He won, but then there was, as he was preparing to be sworn in, something happened. And some people say that that is what began serious tribal politics in Nigeria. But that's history, and that's another topic. How we deal with our history, how we confront our history. So it happened, yes. Must we remain in the past? No. A coup happened in 1966. Some great leaders from this region were killed. If I were from this region, or I was related to those people, I would feel aggrieved. But who killed them? Was it all the Igbos that met somewhere in Enugu and decided that they should be killed? No. It was some individuals in the army who were not from one ethnic group. They were from several groups. They organized themselves in their military fashion and decided to do a coup. No ethnic group should bear that responsibility, because no ethnic group planned it. Do you see the point? This is what I'm talking about, dealing with history. But that's a separate matter. I'm coming out with a new book soon, and this topic will be one of the things that will be addressed in the book. So, in the context of Nigeria, I was saying that it's better for our youth to begin to become actively involved in voting. Now, the reason I think this is more important is that it will give our youth much more influence and a real voice in politics and in political outcomes. It will create an enabling environment for a generational takeover of leadership. Because the youth will eventually emerge as leaders with real experience. But first, you start by putting in place the right kinds of people. They may be 25 years old, they may be 40, they may be 55, they may be 60. Some people will say, well, they shouldn't be 70, but I don't want to get into that. Now, this approach will be better than contesting elections for the mere sake of youth candidacy in an environment that is still dominated by the adverse vice grip of the old and established order of career politicians. Regarding the second set of options, as to whether you should participate informally through civil society protests like they did in the Arab Spring, or through structural politics by becoming members of political parties. Again, my recommendation here will be that the youth should go into political parties. Participating through civic protests is important as an exercise of civic rights, but in itself will not create structural change. What happened with the Arab Spring? The youth rose up, and it looked like something great was about to happen. And they were able to shake up the system. But ultimately, because the political party structures in the various countries in the Maghreb were still populated by the ancien regime, at the end of the day, nothing really fundamental happened in the Arab world. It was an awakening, but it was an awakening. It was like lighting a candle, and it flamed for a while, but the wind blew, and the candle died. That is what happened with the Arab Spring. We don't want that to happen here. We want a candle that will light and stay lit. We want youth to awake and to arise and stay standing. We want youth to affect the future of Nigeria in an organized and structured manner, with the right type of mindset, with the right type of worldview. That is when we will know that you are, as they say, woke. So, when you want to join new parties, or when you want to join parties, I have a caveat. For me, any political party that has a youth wing or women's wing is a dinosaur political contraption. Do you hear me? The reason is this. There is an inherent, especially in our societal context, there's an inherent marginalization that is taking place. Some people own the structure, they control it. You are the youth wing. You are, that's tokenism. You are women's wing. No. I prefer parties, or we should have parties where everybody is together. In fact, we should have parties where the youth are the greatest in number, so there's no need for them to become, if there's any wing, then they're the main wing. That is where we should be going. So when you want to go into structural politics, keep this in mind. Because we're trying to change the system, and we're trying to change the system for the better. I think there is no doubt, there is a consensus that the old political class, the career political class, has failed Nigerians. I have no problem saying that, because it's the truth. 57 years after independence, where are we? 4,000 megawatts of electricity for 180 million people. In South Africa, they have 50 million people, and they have 40,000 megawatts. In Brazil, they have almost 200 million people. They have 120,000 megawatts of electricity. And we're sitting around here calling ourselves a great country. We're sitting around here saying we have potential. For how long shall we have potential? This is where I am now. I have changed my position. My position is, let's move into the future, and let's take the decisive steps we need to take now to put in place the kind of leadership that will take us into the future. What kind of leadership will take you into the future? Nigeria has problems that require the knowledge of technocrats. But then, they will have to be now given political authority to solve problems. If you have 30 million people unemployed, I've just told you about venture capital and how it can help create jobs. Why haven't your politicians told you that since 1999? Abi? I'm sorry. I'm telling you because I know it. I'm telling you because I know the book. And I know the practice because I've also been an official. I have been a deputy governor of the central bank. I've been involved in the management of the economy. I'm a professor of international business and economic policy. And I'm not ashamed of it. Because our politicians want to make you ashamed of being an intellectual. And that is why I love this Towards an Intellectual Tomorrow initiative. I love it. Go and look at every society that is making progress. It is the mind that is at work. But in this country, they want to tell you that no, it is mobilization. It is stomach infrastructure. Oh dear. And I've said it. The only guarantee that stomach infrastructure gives you is a trip to the toilet. There's nowhere else you're going with stomach infrastructure. What you need is mental infrastructure. That is what builds a sustainable tomorrow. So, beware about youth wings. Yesterday's men and women, they use the youth for their dirty jobs while stubbornly clinging on to power and beclouding your future. And as I said, these perspectives come from the experience of the Arab Spring. You have people who were in politics from when you were breastfeeding. They are still in politics, still wanting you to elect them to office. So when they are retiring, you would have also reached retirement age, and you and them will retire together. I beg you, that's not a good formula. It's not. So what is stopping Nigerian youth from claiming the future? The youth participation in Nigeria is very low. In 2015, how many people voted? Only about 30 million people. But there were another 60 million that were eligible to vote but chose to stay home. A poster that is going around says, bad politicians are elected by good men and women who do not vote. That's how bad leaders come and stay. Because if good people begin to come out and challenge them, the paradigm will begin to what? Shift. And it will shift for the better. So the implications of whether you vote or not are huge. And then the implications of whether you vote rightly, for the right reasons, or make your choices correctly are also huge. So, look, 80% of Argentinian youth vote. 78% of youth in Brazil vote. 80% of youth in Peru vote. 55% in Romania vote. This is what we should be looking at in Nigeria, starting 2019. So, we know that digital and social media are playing an increasingly large role in election outcomes, but are yet to become decisive. And so it's yet to be seen if this will be different in a country such as Nigeria, where the youth make up a very large swathe of the population. 60 to 70 million youth, people aged between 18 and 35. That's a huge number. And if you take a stand, this country will change tomorrow. If you take a stand and you take the correct stand, and the correct stand, in my view, involves, amongst other things, inviting some people respectfully to go into retirement so that we can move forward. So, my vision for Nigeria, then, is to have the voting power of you, the youth, deployed first in preventing bad leaders from returning to power and truncating their stranglehold on our collective progress by electing competent leaders. That decision should be based, as I've said, on character, capacity, competence, and track record. It should also be informed not necessarily by a perspective of youth for the sake of youth. We recognize that gerontocracy is an unhealthy bane of Nigeria's politics, and that the time has come to send Nigeria's underperforming career politicians into retirement. The challenge is to find the right balance in the candidates for various offices in our democracy. Voter apathy is the biggest enemy. There is no excuse. Not the imperfections and difficulties of the voter registration process. Not the excuse that past elections have presented us with poor choices. I was asked that question, but we had these two choices. How for do? We had to select one. But I say that if we vote more in our numbers as youth, better candidates will begin to come up for you to select them. That is what will happen. Not the rigging of elections in the past. It's not an excuse. So, even in the most perfect of circumstances, it will require years of collective hard work to make Nigeria begin to truly work for every one of us. And let us face it, things are very far from perfect in Nigeria. It takes years to ensure that resources are allocated to deal with the problems of here and now, and the problems of a better Nigeria 5, 15, and 50 years down the line. So our future, our present, and our future, all of it comes down to you, the youth. Your vote, your choices. As I said, in 2015, 15% made the choices for all of us. In 2019, I want you to be the young man trying to feed his family who will reshape the country. I want you to be the young woman, businesswoman, who will steer our nation's course. By making the simple choice of registering to vote and obtaining your voter's card, you seize the opportunity to help direct our journey. It is your right, and it is vital for you, for us, to rise together. If there is any lesson Nigerians should take away from elections that have occurred all over the world, it is that every vote is consequential. You matter, and your choices shape the future of our country. There are many of us. We must work together and make Nigeria a country to be proud of. You and me together. Register and obtain your PVC. This time around, the 62 million people who did not vote in 2015 must take a stand. This time around, the 62 million people cannot keep silent. This time around, the 62 million people who did not vote in 2015 must lead the charge to a better Nigeria. Let the work begin. Thank you.